Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to give the rest of the crowd a minute or two to log in and we'll get started.
Are those your Gould paintings, Bill?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Beautiful.
I can cheat and give you a little tour there.
Okay, do. Oh, pretty.
So Gadwall, Goldeneye, Pintail, and Northern Shovelers.
Wow. Oh, those shovelers are gorgeous. Wow.
Yeah, all four species. This was out of the Birds of Great Britain set, but all four species occur here in the DC area.
Nice.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Clark, and it's my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Interface to the Adaptation webinar series. We really believe in the power of taking the whole, especially in times of uncertainty. And like you, we're learning every day in real time, and we're asking questions and consulting experts. We're collecting data and really adapting to this new normal and trying to create a new, better way. So we've assembled 3 panel discussions around just that, learning from COVID-19, and organized it in how we as human beings really relate to our world. So from a global perspective, as an industry and as individuals. So today's panel will be about the implications for the world of what we're going through right now, and it is made up of these people who happen to be longtime partners of Interface and truly extended family. They were part of the group who Ray Anderson pulled together, our founder, back in the mid-90s to redefine how we do business, doing business without doing harm to our environment. And most recently, taking it a step further to not only doing no harm, but actually reversing climate change and taking action there. And they're the folks who continue to answer the call for Interface. I am honored and thrilled that they are here with us today. And we will get to that discussion in a hot minute. But one little piece of housekeeping. Following the discussion, we'll take some questions from the audience. And the best way to submit a question for Bill or Janine or Paul is to drop a chat into the question box, and we'll address those at the close. Okay. With that, I will turn it over to our fearless moderator, environmental strategist, and founder of Terrapin Bright Green, Bill Browning.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks to Interface for sponsoring this conversation. So I have the great pleasure of getting to introduce 2 colleagues and longtime friends, and I'll make it kind of personal. I actually first encountered Paul through his products and Smith and Hawken, and then through an extraordinary book that I reread every few years called Growing a Business. And I think it has some of the most amazing insights in thinking about how you operate a business and the meaning of business. And then Paul was really the genesis of Interface's efforts around rethinking commerce. And Ray Anderson, the founder of Interface, described reading The Ecology of Commerce as a spear in his chest. And that caused a revolution that is still ongoing within the company. Janine similarly met through her writing an extraordinary book called Biomimicry, and that Amory Levins, who I worked with for many years, read and got all excited, and was everyone he met, he said, "You have to read this, you have to read this, you have to read this." We all read it and agreed it was extraordinary, And somehow Amory was able to convince Janine to come speak at a meeting of utility executives in
Oh, yeah.
Aspen that were meeting on energy efficiency. And it was really pretty astonishing. About a third of the people in the room had no idea what she was talking about. Another third was interested, and another third were wildly enthusiastic. But fortunately, Janine stuck around, and we spent a day having a conversation about not biomimicry, but actually biophilia, because we were doing work on that at the Institute at the time. And Janine was planning on writing a book on why homes are habitat and we feel comfortable in certain spaces. Unfortunately, she's never gotten to write that book, and I'm hoping that someday, after she finishes the one she's working on right now, that she'll come back to the topic. But it's a topic that Terrapin, our firm, a small research and consulting firm, we're still pretty heavily engaged in both of those topics, biophilia and biomimicry. And so in this larger context, though, we're talking about sort of the situation we're in right now. And I want to show, if I can make this work. Let's see if I can get this to share my screen. And can people see this graph? Show my screen. There we go.
Yes.
So this was in the New York Times 2 days ago. And it's pretty extraordinary. And what it's showing is the drop in CO2 emissions on a daily basis over the last few months. Now, obviously, you see those are coming back up again, but a drop of 17% on a daily basis is pretty extraordinary. And what we saw out of that, so if we can go back to main camera, great. And okay, so Lauren, hopefully we're no longer sharing, we're just showing the conversation.
We're still seeing your screen, Bill.
Okay. Can we move back to the main one?
Are you able to toggle the button that you chose to share in the first place?
Okay, sorry about this. We will clean it up here in a moment. So that struck me as pretty extraordinary. And then reading, seeing clean air in Delhi, seeing clean air in places that have not had, or Beijing, was pretty extraordinary. Blue skies in those places. Now, I'd seen that happen before in Beijing once before, right before the Olympics. They shut down a bunch of stuff and had blue air and blue skies, and that was pretty amazing. But we saw other things as well. So Janine, did you guys are a little more remote than some of the rest of us. What sort of things did you experience there?
Well, I'm sitting in Western Montana. There's not that many people here. We're social distancing as a lifestyle pretty much all the time. But tourists couldn't come in. And we realize now what it's like really to have these amazing wildlands even more thinly populated than they are normally in the summer we do get a huge influx of people, and we didn't even realize it, but definitely wildlife is more on the move. And there's just elk in people's fields more than normal. Yeah, it just seems, and in my pastures too, it just seems there's fewer cars, definitely fewer traffic, less traffic. So wildlife is migrating more freely here, I think. And there are fewer planes. There were few to begin with, but there are fewer contrails. So we see that too. Yeah, Alan Weissman's book, The World Without Us, where he envisions what would happen if we left the planet. And I'm glad to see that we don't have to leave the planet. We don't have to leave the planet. We have to pull back, we have to change, we have to slow down, reduce our or change our impacts. We don't have to leave for this to happen.
Paul, did you see?
What about you, Paul? What have you seen?
Well, I'm not a Montanan, I'm a writer, and we learned to social distance early in life. And I live in a very wild area, even though I'm close to the Bay Area, I'm in the Bay Area. But so, and I think everybody knows the skies. I haven't really noticed much difference because I've removed from it in the first place, except, but I do notice, I can't disaggregate COVID-19 from Black Lives Matter anymore though, because there's two converging changes that are occurring right now, and they're pivotal, I think, and historic. And I mean, we could talk about COVID in itself because it was incipient, but I think Black Lives Matter and the fallout from that, or the fallout, really not fallout, but I mean, from that has been extraordinary. And to me now they're converging in a way, because what COVID-19 sort of revealed was, because, right away, well, when are we gonna get back to normal? That was, and what it revealed is that what the world was abnormal and is abnormal, extremely abnormal. And then when Black Lives Matter came on top of that with the lynching of George Floyd, I think because you could watch it for 8 minutes and 36 seconds, just the weirdest thing of all, to show that around the world, something else came out, a different thing besides the virus. What came out is the understanding, both self and other, of just how deeply embedded our sense of our racism and our othering of the world is. We've been othering the world, and those traits that are they're so embedded in us, each of us, that they're invisible. We didn't see them, and then it took 8 minutes and 36 seconds. You go, oh my God, and you realize, that the world has changed, completely from the aftermath of that. So we have those two changes occurring right now, which I find fascinating in terms of the opening and the receptivity and the pause and the self-reflection. And I'm not trying to overlook the suffering that COVID-19 particularly has caused, particularly in this country. And but in this country, what's been revealed to me is that we're a failed state, and we don't know it. This is a dystopian failed state. I mean, in Denmark, when somebody loses a job, they retrain them. It's not like, oh, you don't have a job? Here's training. And here we lose a job, we have 40 million people. It's like, well, that's your problem. And I think that what COVID has done, and what the Black Lives Matter thing is, that no, everything is our problem, and everything's our opportunity or a gift or a possibility revealed by so-called problems and so forth. I mean, not so-called if you're sick and dying. I don't mean to put it down, but I'm just saying is that this is very revelatory time. And I just love the fact that I feel sorry for the mountain lion, but the mountain lion was found in downtown Los Angeles yesterday, and you hear all these reports of kangaroos going through Adelaide. It's so beautiful to see how quickly a wildlife set oh, I think it's cool. No cars, I can go across the road, I can do this. You know, they became aware of their boundaries in large, you know, in which they felt safe. And I just, that makes my heart sing.
I was out
Yeah.
running. DC's been locked down, and it's finally opening up, and we could only go out to go shopping or exercise, run or bicycle. And I was out running a couple weeks ago, and I'm running along Rock Creek, which is in the center of Washington, D.C. And I see a lot of bird life there pretty frequently, but I've been seeing more of that. But one night was really extraordinary. I saw great blue herons. I saw black-crowned night herons. I saw entire families of wood ducks, you know, and then the two biggest beavers I've ever seen in my entire life. And I didn't even know that we had beavers in the city, let alone beavers of that size. And, you know, Rock Creek Parkway is normally a very busy traffic corridor. And there they were. Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that retuning into home, that's one of the beautiful gifts of this, is that people, you know, my friend Azita says Mother Nature sent us to our rooms, and a lot of people took walks outside, and they noticed that in the Northern Hemisphere was spring, and they noticed those trees, you know, shaking out their leaves, and they noticed all the birds that you just talked about, you know, and they noticed when they didn't have that too, when they walked out into their neighborhood and there was no tree. There are things that have to do with this. I think, Paul, what you were saying, I completely agree that they're intertwined. I think that COVID set us up for the natural reaction to George Floyd being what it was, because we got in touch with our biological vulnerability. We realized nobody escapes, nobody's immune to this, and we're biological beings covered by viruses, and we're none of us get to skip this, right? And so that othering wasn't working biologically, and we realized, and we learned a lot, you know, scientifically. You had, you know, people learning a whole lot about the connection between biodiversity fragmentation and wildlife trade, and how we treat the rest of the natural world, and our own virus-prone selves. And the people who were getting it were overwhelmingly more vulnerable because they had these comorbidities of, you know, air pollution. They lived in air pollution zip codes, and right. And the earth has a morbidity too, right? And it's fragile and strained. We saw that, but all that biological awareness then led, I think, to us watching a death was completely unacceptable to us. And I've been waiting for some sort of time when we begin to stop the othering, and we realize that, you know, that circle of kinship that Aldo Leopold talks about, which is people who don't look like us, species that don't look like us, that circle of kinship becomes that we see ourselves as one species, one family, right? And I think, and worldwide, the protests, it's been amazing, and I think they're very attuned, they're very tied to this feeling that we're vulnerable, we're biological beings.
Yeah, there's no question that COVID really revealed all our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, because we always are vulnerable. But to reveal it and to feel it, and I really want to go back to what you said about othering, because when you saw that video, for I don't know what percent, 99.9, whatever, it's unimaginable how one human being could do that to another human being. In other words, you just can't imagine what was in his mind, what was his conditioning, you know, over growing up, and to get to that point where he could do that to another human being.
With his hand in his pocket, just like cavalierly.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'll stay here. But the thing about that is that othering is the core disease that's been revealed, and I think people feel it. I mean, we other climate change. We keep talking about it. It's like we're gonna fight it, combat it, and we're weaponizing almost everything we do in language, and we see climate as elsewhere, as atmosphere is someplace else. It's not here. It's not where it is. You just exhale that's atmosphere, and so the conditioning of us as being individual and separate and needing to dominate in order to live, survive, and this and that sort of, surmounts everything, every other ethos and so forth, has been so revealed as both corrupt and sociopathic, really. And so I'm very grateful to his martyrdom. I mean, George Floyd was martyred. He's a classic martyr. He's a true martyr.
Yeah.
In the Joan of Arc sense and many others and so forth. And what his death has done for the world is just extraordinary. And I just feel like we're at such a teachable moment of what we will learn, what's being taught. I don't know, it's another thing, but I can't think of my life when there's been a more pivotal moment of opening in the world than right now.
And possibility. I mean, there's not, you can't say, I was on a call with Lynn Twist recently, and she was like, where did all those $2 trillion come from? Where did that come from? Like, where was that?
Yeah.
When, right? You can no longer, the excuse can no longer be that we can't mobilize and distribute money. Now, the question's how and what do we value now, right? And you can't say that we can't stop the juggernaut for a while. Right? You can't say that either. There's all kinds of things that, that we're not, that, universal basic income and healthcare and all becomes very possible now. I think it is. I think it's a malleable moment. And I think we're going to be asking a lot more of ourselves and our designs going forward. We're going to have to, everything we design, and I mean that with a capital D, with whether it's a policy or a building, we're going to have to ask a lot more of it. It can't be just about what it's for us, right? What it gives us. It has to be about what it gives back to people and to the others we other with the circle of life.
I come back to David Brower's comment about nature bats last. And if we ever needed proof of it, we just got it.
I always used to say that nature bats last and owns the stadium.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Right. When you say bats, I've been looking at this backlash against bats, right? As if the bats were. And here's a perfect thing of the othering. One of these things that we don't even see. I've been waiting for, and there are small scientific studies that are starting to do this, but why aren't we looking at the bats? The bats literally are 400 million years old, and they've been living with COVID. Right? They've been living with coronaviruses. There's 33,000 coronaviruses in bat species. To look at how they live with, and people are starting to look, and they don't. The trick is that they don't react. It's not a runaway immune response. And there's lots you can learn from that. I mean, we can learn directly into our medical of how to treat people, and yet you don't hear about that, which is the ultimate othering. The bat gave us it, right? But we're not looking at how it's stayed healthy. Yeah.
So as we think about this, and particularly with our audience today, what does this tell us about the built environment in particular, since so many of the folks with us today are designers?
Why don't you answer that question, Bill, first? Because you're more involved with the built environment than Janine and myself are.
I mean, a couple of the insights that we obviously there's been phenomenal interest in biophilic design. We've done a lot of interviews and a lot of conversations about how do I bring nature into my home, and also coming out of it, how to bring contact of nature into the workplace, the biophilic component. But the other is just also that what I am a little worried about is I'm seeing a lot of folks who are looking at this as, oh, social distancing is a permanent thing, and how do we design, we have to redesign spaces and all that. And it's like, no, we are a really social critter. And social distancing as a permanent strategy would be tragic and really counterproductive. And so, yeah, we're in conversations, even on the interface headquarters building, about what design changes for the intermediate term, but making sure that we don't undo the capability to have more full interaction later. And so this sort of balance between what do we need to do to allow people some level of contact, but also some level of separation and not make it permanent. And I don't think it sheets of plexiglass everywhere, which is what we are seeing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I think when I talk about this idea of that we're going to have to ask our designs to do more and to give back, I think the metrics around positive, not just zero, but actually what does the building and its site do? And we've been focused on wellness inside the walls. And I think we need to realize that people walk outside those walls and they're affected. So we need wellness outside the walls. And I think that development needs to be a part of that. We've been working on this, and we worked with it with Bill and on Factory as a Forest. That's what we mean by that. Biomimetically, we measure the ecosystem services coming from a forest next door. And then we say, why can't this building clean this much water, clean this much air, build this much soil, support this much biodiversity? And I've never seen a time when that is more relevant, actually, to try to do. Because if we go back to that air pollution idea, and there's a new study now in June 1 about premature births for heat waves and for air pollution, and how it disproportionately affects African American women, moms. And premature birth, stillbirth, I mean, very, very serious numbers. It's 13 million births were surveyed, and it's bad. So if a building and its site doesn't remove air pollution from the surrounding areas, it's not doing enough. It's not being a good neighbor. And I honestly think the new civic gesture is not a stadium or a museum. It's a healthy watershed. And I think our built world needs to measure itself, give itself these aspirational goals. We call it positive design, and it's ecological performance standards. And our consultancy, Biomimicry 3.8, we work on that, and we work with companies now like Microsoft, Data Center of the Future. How does it give back? Ford, 4 buildings with Ford right now. They're building an innovation hub in Dearborn, and they're going to have the community use that hub and the employees use that hub. So in what ways are those employees getting better health and wellness by being near and around that place, right? And biodiversity is health and wellness now, right? Because of lack of biodiversity lets things like West Nile virus go crazy, or Lyme's disease go crazy, because their biodiversity is where you have enough hosts that not all of them carry the disease well. So if you simplify things and you don't have biodiversity, you have hosts that are very disease prone, and they spread this stuff. So biodiversity has suddenly become something we need to care about if we care about our employees and the neighboring neighborhoods.
The wildest piece on that we've come across lately, because we're in on a couple big, very large building public projects. One being an airport terminal, and everyone's running around going, how do we sterilize it? And we've been reading some stuff about microbiome lately, And actually, we're coming to the conclusion that, yeah, there are some things in surfaces you want to sterilize, but in general, it might, in the long run, be better if we were looking at how do we increase the biodiversity of the microbiome within buildings. Because as we're seeing, the evidence is that when you wipe everything out, what comes back first is the nasties. Whereas there's some evidence now that if you increase the biodiversity of the microbiome within the buildings, that you wind up with a healthier situation for the people.
Exactly. And there's all those co-benefits with biophilia. If you have a living machine or a living wall or a bioremediation wall, you know, it's good for people. It's a biophilic win, but then you also have these other biodiversity, both inside and outside the walls, these biodiversity wins, and connecting those fragmented places, you know, working with other NGOs in the city, the company saying, my site is no longer going to be this sterile parking lot and this sterile rooftop, but it's going to be part of a water purification landscape. It's going to be part of a wildlife migration landscape, a food farm. Yeah. You can see that I believe anything is possible these days.
There's a group called the Biophilic Cities Network, and we had our monthly call yesterday, and each time a different city presents some of the work they're doing. And yesterday was Edmonton. And they, for the last 20 years, have been rethinking their relationship with wildlife. And so they're looking at these different pieces of habitat within the fabric of the city and going, what's most endangered, or what species are in decline, and how do we make sure that we reverse that? And so coming up with some really amazing ways using camera traps of all things to monitor movement. And during this time frame, that's given them even more stuff to look at. But then they're actually have created corridors through the fabric of the city, including probably more overpasses and underpasses for wildlife than any place else. They finished one just recently for moose. And within a day and a half of it being completed, they see a mother moose and two calves going past the camera. And they're like, okay, so if we, rethink this. And so they've got mountain lions in the core of the city. They've got all sorts of wildlife interactions, but they're even looking at the transit of bird species and, where birds are comfortable, what they're comfortable in crossing and not crossing, and doing sort of heat maps to network that stuff together, so that the entire city becomes a network of interconnected habitats.
Mm.
Beautiful.
So in some ways, this was kind of a rest period, right? It was a reset, a pause. How do we create pauses again, but without so much trauma? Or how do we make this something that we come back to?
That to me is a cultural choice. And with all due respect to my fellow countrymen, we don't have a culture in America. We have cultures and subcultures, and we have digital cultures and digital bubbles, and we're fragmented as a culture. We don't have that cohesion that you do in other countries, where they could make that collective decision should they make that. I don't know of anyone who has, except perhaps, the European understanding that 4 weeks is the minimum vacation for a person, but they don't occur at the same time, So it's a very good question. I mean, it points to, well, what would it be like if we took a month off, everybody, you know, at the same time? But you know, I mean, whatever that means, a pause, you know, and a reset. I mean, it's biblical, you know, every seventh year on your you go fallow on your land, you know, so that's Sunday, but that's, I mean, so that idea has been in the culture a long time, but it essentially has been wiped out, you know, by stores being open 24/7 and Sunday's gone and all the kind of things where we had even, you know, circadian pauses or weekly pauses or monthly pauses all wiped out in this culture. And I think that's why I think for many of us, if we go to different cultures, we're so appreciative of the difference, you know, in emphasis, difference in values, really. And I don't know how, you know, like I say, I believe America is a failed state. It's got every sign. If you look at what's a failed state, we got it all. So I mean, it's like, if you know, it's by definition. I mean, from our leadership to, you know, to the capital got more concentrated in the last 3 months, not less. It got even, you know, I mean, income inequality went up, it didn't go down. You know, and then look at our healthcare system, if you can call it that. Look at our food system broke down. You know, we're a failed state. We have a, you know, we have a dictator and or wannabe dictator, and we still have the rule of law somewhere lurking. But I mean, we have all those earmarks. So the question is whether we will take this time actually to reimagine what it is to be in America. And I hope we.
I mean, even you being able to say that is a hallmark of these times. I think a lot of people are saying that out loud, because in the same way we saw the biological vulnerability, we saw stripped bare the dysfunction, the dystopia of our economic system and the brittleness of it. The fact that, you know, food chains are, you know, dangerously brittle. The food supply chains and other supply chains. I mean, it's just that sort of being able to see it and having enough taken away, enough distraction taken away, that we had that moment of reflection and that we can say out loud now. And then this other thing came where we saw the worst of another sort of cultural failing, you know, a whole culture of disregard for life, human life. We saw that at the same time. And I think a lot of people are saying, okay, we're not the greatest nation on earth. And you know, we began by asking ourselves, well, how can the richest country in the world not have PPE? And that was the wrong question, you know. Being the richest country in the world doesn't get us anything, right? Like now it's, are we the country that cares most about people? How can we become that country, right? Like those, I think everything gets measured now differently. And I hope we don't slide to, you know, back to normal too quickly, back to abnormal, as you said, too quickly.
So as individuals or as companies, how, you know, what sort of steps do you all believe should be taken? What should we be doing?
I mean, as environmentalists, you know, we care very much about obviously the environment, including the atmosphere and reversing global warming. But the fact of the matter is that if we want to save the earth, we better create a world that's worth saving. And this system isn't worth saving. Tyson food is not worth saving. Okay. I mean, the economic social structure that we've created is not worth saving. And I'm not saying toss it out, but it's not like we need to, you know, restructure the food system or this system. We need a new system, and a system that has its priorities right, and that is people, children, people, women, people of color, older people. You know, I mean, none of those people are valued, actually. None of those different sectors, how you look at the demography, is actually valued in this culture. Maybe in some town or this place or that church, but as overall, it's not. And so I think there's an opening here to speak to that, because that's not I don't think that's a party line. It's not a Republican issue, a Democratic issue. You know, it's a human issue, and you know, the same thing that caused the shift to the right, or if you can call that with Trump, is the same thing we're seeing on the left, which is, you know, dehumanization, marginalization, feeling a lack of self-worth, not being valued by, you know, your own culture, your own governing systems, your own corporations. And it's played out in two different ways politically, but actually it's the same malaise. And so we need to go right to that malaise, because that actually is very fruitful. That that can be cultured, so to speak, into something that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
As a possibility.
So
oh, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead. We're at 3:40, so we're going to open up for questions here.
Okay, I was just going to say that in the natural world, everything turns towards weakness. Everything turns towards, like, if you get a cut, your body jumps into motion and begins to send platelets and all the beautiful things in the immune system, and it turns towards weakness. It turns towards whatever needs doing, and everything else becomes secondary, right? Like and we've just, you know, this turn towards so-called winners, right, and ignore the rest is unnatural. It's not even our true nature. It's not. I mean, you see it in, you know, when there's really bad storms and people rush in, and that's our true nature, right? So how do we remove whatever it is that has us in the spell, the entrancement, that we've forgotten who we are, you know?
Yeah. So Lauren, questions?
Yes. So here's one for all of you. Hello, please help us understand how we, all of us, not just the design community, capture this moment of human awareness to trigger the same public awareness and response about climate change and what we need to do there. It still seems to be on the back burner. Everyone is returning to their cars, their old habits, etc.
Or look at you, Paul.
I'll try. I mean, yes, of course, I see the same thing the questioner sees. We all do. I do think that the world right now is working through trauma. In other words, this is a traumatic moment for different countries and peoples in different ways. That it's not all the same, but precipitated by the pandemic, and then secondarily, not second in order in importance, but in following that by the George Floyd lynching, really. And so actually, I don't know if this is a good moment to generalize about what's going to happen or what people have experienced, because I actually think we're all in a traumatic disorder situation, socially and politically. And I don't know when and how we're going to get out of that, you know, but I don't think it's going to be soon. Having said all that, though, what I do feel, though, is that there is a receptivity that wasn't there before. And I just, it's anecdotal, there's no measure of it, but I mean, that how many people are saying, you know, I actually don't want to go back. I mean, gosh, it's so nice. I spend more time with my kids. I actually school them. I'm doing this. I'm spending more time walking. You know, there's birds. I mean, it's like I didn't realize I'm not going to get to fly. That's great. I'm not, you know, playing. It's not like, oh, and so many different aspects. I'm cooking more. I'm buying locally. And, you know, all that sort of stuff is happening. And I'm not saying any of those things themselves will make a big difference, but they make a big difference in the terms of people's awareness of self, and you know, and their relationship to the world. And we'll see what comes of that. I actually feel there'll be a much greater receptivity to addressing global warming post this than there was prior. And I would say, you know, without, I mean, the impact of global warming is 100x of COVID, at least, maybe greater. And so I think that there's going to be an opening to understanding that if we communicate it in a way that actually creates a sense of possibility and actually wonder and as opposed to, you know, we're screwed if we don't do this sort of thing, and that doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if we can come out of this with, like I say, a kind of resolution, or being resolute about healing the world as opposed to dealing with the world, you know, and again, I think that remains to be seen, you know, because I do feel the world is traumatized. I really do.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. But I think looking to, we've lost so much faith in government, you know, at the federal level, governmental institutions not being able to handle this, and we poured out on the streets in a way that is different. And there's so much talk now about allies, what that means to be allied with a cause. And we, you know, Greta and the climate strikes were out on the street before. There's this sort of growing sense that it's not going to come from, you know, some bureaucratic edict. You know, it's going to come from up. It's going to have to be what we all demand, more of and less of, and so I'm just wondering if you can see that, you know, that remember, you know, It's a Wonderful Life, when he's taken on this journey where he sees the world, right? Like, you know, if he had died, remember that, you know, yeah. I think we were given a glimpse when we're back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. We've been given a glimpse of another kind of world, experientially, a world in which it's a little slower pace. You're not racing around to business meetings all the time. You do spend more time with your kids. What matters, you know, you're beginning to see what makes life worth living. And now we get to put back in what we want. Now we've seen that little world. The question is, will we fight for it now that we've sort of glimpsed a cleaner sky, a more sane, humane way of being? And again, when we talk about the big pause, I always have to say to myself, hey, what about all the essential workers who have not taken a breath? They're exhausted. So there's a whole bunch of people for whom this is a complete, they're not on this, you know, three-way call here. So I do want to respect that. But again, didn't we get a glimpse of them as the real heroes? Now that we're not watching sports, they're our heroes.
Well, the one point I want to make is that 60% of the infections are 5 countries. The leaders of those countries are Trump, Putin, Bolsonaro, Modi, and Johnson. What do those 5 men have in common? And that is, they are basically demagogic, you know, dictator type leaders, nationalists, you know, pseudo-populists and so forth. I hope the world, they have 9% of the population with 60% of the cases. There's a big political lesson right there for the world to say, you know, how is this working for you? It's not. And so that is also a possibility that exists right now, where people look back and go, these aren't leaders. You know, we didn't have leadership. And let's see what happens.
Yeah, for me, it speaks that we all need to be leaders now. We can't be quiet anymore. We have to both speak up and take action. Lauren, are there more?
There are. The next one says, is it possible to collect enough data to make the case that sustained periods of frequent rest for the environment can stem the tide or even reverse climate change? If so, how do we move that forward in terms of design, policy, and awareness of the general public?
I think one of the things that is not understood, well understood, it should be, and Janine touched on a little bit earlier, is that there's 2,000 gigatons of C, carbon, not CO2, C, in our wetlands, in our grasslands, in our forest lands, in our peatlands, in our farmlands. And that is almost 2.5 times more C than is in the atmosphere itself. And these forest systems and wetland systems, grassland systems, these systems are all degrading or being burned or whatever. And if 10%, if we lose 10% of those systems, that's 100 ppm in the atmosphere. Okay, because when you lose them, we have both recoverable and irrecoverable carbon in these systems. And so one of the things that is really lovely about understanding that is that habitat fragmentation and biodiversity and the care and appreciation and support of the most exquisite small things in the environment are ways in which we actually address global warming. In other words, let's keep the carbon we have here. It is the basis of life, you know. And so not so like, oh, if I'm not solarizing my house, I can't afford it, you know, that taking care of small things actually really do make a difference, especially when it comes to nature. And I'll let Janine add more to that. But I just think yeah.
No, the small things. Here's a stat that's just amazing. American cities, 40% of American cities are backyards and balconies with flower pots. So taking care of small things, when we do this Project Positive with companies, we say, whatever land you touch, you can heal. And so we say, what kind of land do you have? And they say, well, we've got a corporate headquarters, we've got our factories. Okay, that's our real estate portfolio. Maybe we have some in our investments. I'm like, no, you touch a lot of land. What other land do you touch? And it's, what if you had a program to increase ecosystem services benefits for all your employees? What about for all your customers? Those pixelated healing, those little 40% is not little. That's EL 360, just amazing to me. What if you then say, we buy all of our ingredients and our packaging, and every farm and every forest and every ocean that we touch, we're going to do management so that positive ecosystem services come about, meaning that agriculture, you know, is good for biodiversity. We stop, you know, we get microbial ecology back. We get organic, you know, it's more than carbon sequestration. It's all the other things that come with it, and water storage and all of that. And we begin to count those up. You asked, how do we get there? I think we get there by counting what we've already done and saying, good job. We are producing some ecosystem services and some of the things we've already, design interventions we've already done. And then we say, how many more can we do? How much more positive healing, pixelated healing can we do by just this thought experiment of how much land do I touch? Because whatever part of the earth you touch, you can heal. I believe that, or you can help heal.
Ray Anderson's favorite song, Right in the Corner Where You Are.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Well, I think also there's a kind of a failure of imagination in the sense that we've been taught to steal the world, to steal the futures, and we count that as GDP. If you steal our children's future and sell it today, it's GDP. But the failure of imagination comes from the fact that we can heal the future, and that too is GDP. In other words, and it's funny because every corporation knows it has to invest in its future, so it does R&D. If it doesn't do that, it's a goner. And I would say the Earth is, you know, our company. And so, I mean, the future is about investing in it, you know, and exactly what Janine is talking about. I mean, there's extraordinary ways that we can do that. And I don't mean to marginalize, I mean, the emissions, the carbon emissions from fossil fuels, but I actually think from what I'm seeing is that we will beat the 2050 goal by a long shot in terms of renewable energy. I don't think there's any question in my mind about it. It's like, it's extraordinary what's happening in wind and solar, et cetera, et cetera. But But I think we can do that one, but we have to really work on protecting what's here and sequestering and bringing it back home. And that is such beautiful, wonderful, extraordinary work. And it lights up the imagination. I was thinking about this group in Illinois who restored they took a farm that's been drained for 90 years, a cornfield, a huge cornfield. And they took out all the tile and then, and then 2 lakes filled up in 3 months that hadn't been there for 90 years. And they just recently did a BioBlitz where it had scientists and docents and students and, to just map what was there, what had come back. And except for the fish, everything they found had come back by itself. How? They don't know. 951 species. Unbelievable.
In an Iowa ex-cornfield? Did you say
Illinois.
Iowa?
Iowa? No, it's Illinois. That's the same difference.
Yeah.
So forth.
Yeah.
And it just shows you that, and I mean, including the white pelican, these very secretive but huge, 9-foot wingspan birds, that are just so mysterious and go up, 5 miles up in the air. And what are they doing up there? And nobody knows. I mean, there's so much beauty and mystery. The point being is that if we create the conditions for regeneration, the Earth will do it. The Earth wants to regenerate. And I wasn't there at the BioBlitz, but I've talked to people, and the joy and the children and the people, and we did this together. And look at there's fish. The only thing you put in is fish. That's the only thing you put there. And I just think the whole world is just waiting for us to understand that and to obviously implement it and all that sort of stuff. But it's just there waiting for us.
Oh my God. And that's what we were shown. The little bit of life coming back, we were shown that. Eileen Fisher says, when we get textiles right, we'll measure our success in butterflies.
Yes. Right.
So when, we get into all these metrics, we've got, 26 KPIs in our Project Positive stuff. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the celebration of somebody at the LaGrange factory going out to the daylighted stream and teaching their kid to fish there. I mean, those celebration metrics is how we'll know we're home.
Yeah.
And I think the world is waiting for that. And in the realm of impossible, the global deal for nature is saying, what if half? What if we bring back half? And I don't think we need to be out of it. I don't think it needs to be protected from us. I think we need to be in there in a different way. 50%, half for nature, right? And the global deal for nature is asking for 30 informally protected by 2030, and then 20 in climate stabilization. And I think we can do that. When you look at the areas that are thinly peopled, why don't we move back there in different ways? That's changing how we think of ourselves, right?
Yep.
Like, do we have to exit the planet? No. I think Paul and I both agree with that.
Robbins and Jeffers' old line, not man apart. So I think we are coming to the end of our time. So I need to turn it back over to Lauren here.
Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Paul and Janine. Great discussion. I want to thank everybody who joined us today for tuning in and remind you that the next episode of our series is Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we'll take a look at the pandemic's implications for our industry. So join us for that. A special thanks to our panelists, and have a great afternoon.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you,
Lauren.
everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. All 171 of you out there.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill, for moderating us, and Lauren for getting us here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thank you.